one of the things that we learned in this case was that there are multiple players involved, and I mean many. One load of 5 tons, 3 tons, 10 tons, 20 tons could be owned by 4 or 5 different investors. Some investors in Mexico, like the Güeros, were able to have an entire shipment of 12 to 20 tons there on their own shipped into the country. That's a lot of capital and a lot of credit with Colombian sources. But there's just no one size fits all. Dependent upon the cartel and dependent upon the moment and the relationships, they could combine, various investors could combine loads, multi-thousand kilo loads, and then split it up once it got to Mexico.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of this week's episode of Game of Crimes with Murph in the Morning. My guest this week is Mike Chavarria, retired DEA agent, true patriot, true American patriot, dedicated his entire professional life to serving our country, worked in the U.S. Navy for a number of years, worked at the NCIS for a couple of years, and then joined DEA and did 31 years, there. So here's a man who dedicated his entire professional life to serving his fellow man here in the United States. That's what I call a hero and a patriot. So, Mike, welcome back, brother. I'm so glad you came back for part 2.
Hey, totally my pleasure. It's always an honor to be, with you, talking about stuff that we did and we love doing for a career. So appreciate that, Mr. Murph.
Yeah, I'm still not going to send you any money. But we started yesterday and we covered his career. Mike is a previous guest here from about a year and a half ago on the Game of Crimes, and he's now written a book. The name of his book, and I'm just looking because I want to make sure I get it right, is called Junior, a Son of the Gulf Cartel. I will put a picture up here. You can find it on Amazon. I actually found it at Walmart, on the Walmart website. Did you know that?
No, I did not. I did not know that.
I was shocked to see that, but if you Google it, that's where I found it.
Okay. I know it's, you can find it on Goodreads, of course, Amazon. The thing with Amazon has just recently been released, and there's just a slight delay in it, being available for quick print. And so you can order it, but then you're waiting. You're waiting for it.
But the book is out, right? It
is out. It is out.
So, all right. So, and we'll talk about that more here at the end of the interview. But as we discussed yesterday, Mike is stationed in Houston, Texas. They've initiated an operation, a DEA, and ends up being a multi-agency, multi-jurisdiction, and multi-country investigation called Operation Band of Brothers. That's pretty easy to remember because we've all seen the TV show. Love that movie series. You're stationed in Houston, and you guys had recruited based on a tip from Jimmy Martinez, who's a DEA agent stationed in. Was he in Guadalajara at that time? Yeah,
he and I were kind of partnered while we were in Guadalajara, and so he was intimately familiar with the case. Jimmy was the one that actually flew to Miami, sat in on the debriefing of this Colombian, the first informant that we recruited with the Miami guys.
And then you get this tip, and the second guy, who you refer to as Junior, which is the name of the book, is at Children's Hospital in in Houston. My son's a doctorate surgeon. It's a Children's Hospital of Atlanta. That's what I think of when I think of Children's Hospital.
Wow.
And you guys decide to approach him just to kind of tease him and see what would happen. And lo and behold, he agrees to cooperate, right?
Yes, he did.
And remind everybody about how much cocaine that you were able to put on this guy.
Well, we told him that we would have to demonstrate his willingness, transparency, in coming to Team USA, and it would entail us debriefing him from the moment he facilitated his first kilo of cocaine. And so after 2 days of drilling him and questioning him, wearing him out, we came up with 47 tons. that he that he facilitated.
The sad thing is that's a drop in the bucket to the amount of cocaine that comes into our country, isn't it?
It is. It sure is.
Wow. So now his wife knows nothing about this. How are you guys able to talk to him without her being aware of anything?
It was important for him to know that she was not going to be aware. I mean, clearly they were on pins and needles with their infant daughter and her, the crisis that they were enduring. It was a congenital heart defect. So he said, she's got enough on her plate. She doesn't need to be weighed down with worrying about this. And, I don't need the distraction. So he came on board and said, if I give you all this information, are you just going to kick me to the curb? And I said, that is not how we operate. We got the AUSA online, said, look, if you're honest with us, of course, homicides are a different issue, but we're talking about your role as a smuggler, a facilitator of cocaine. And so we want everything. We want everything. And he did. He gave us everything. And there's a funny moment during the debriefing with him in the hotel. Same hotel where his wife was staying. It was just on the ground floor with us in a large suite where we had, two agents, always with an analyst, and we were debriefing him. And at one point, towards the end of that 47th, when we got to 47th ton, he was laying on the couch with a cold compress on his head and a bottle of Tylenol. And he was moaning. He was moaning, Steve. Because he was forced to reckon with his past. And he said, I can't imagine that you guys are going to forgive me for all that I've done in my life. And I said, of course, Bishop comes in, and says, 47 months.
Bishop being Keith Bishop, former NFL football player for the Denver Broncos, all pro multiple times, who was a DEA agent also down in Houston with you.
Yes, he was. So Keith and I partnered up. We realized that this was going to be an ambitious endeavor, and it would entail the resources of two groups. Keith was a supervisor in the strike force. He was.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say Bishop is a former guest here on the Game of Crimes. I was looking him up to see he was episode 51, which was back in May of 2022. Hilarious guy. But I will tell you, man, he is one of the best investigators, one of the most dedicated people I have ever met in my life.
He is a wiretap master. So is Joe Evans. Both wiretap guys. I can name a number of them. Steve Whipple's another one. I mean, it's just Keith Bishop and I grew very close. And of course, this case helped to facilitate a very long friendship, and we still stay in regular contact. But he came to the table with his resources, and he was a strike force agent or supervisor. So his group was focused on kind of like the 959 that we talked about, on the biggest and baddest traffickers at the time, and they were focused on the Gulf and the Zetas. And so Keith said, I am targeting the Gulf and the Zetas right now, and it's a full-time job, but I can offer up an agent or two, but I can give you a full-time agent. And I had 2 or 3 agents working on it. And then we both shared an analyst, an intelligence analyst, and she did a bang-up job. And all the characters are revealed in the book. Of course, this operation and the case and the story, there's so many other characters that I could not name. I acknowledged many of them at the end of the book, but I was told, hey, you've got to cut the number of characters so that this is, makes for easier reading without, of course, affecting the story. So Keith and I came together. We debriefed this guy, and then we put him on a very short leash. And we got him on the phone with other targets in Mexico, with local targets along the Mexican border, in McAllen and Laredo. And then we got him on the phone with guys working distribution networks in Houston. And we started to develop the case not only internationally, but domestically. And then within a short period of time, we had, we were looking at targets in Panama, targets in Colombia, targets in Guatemala, targets in New York. And New York came to save the day. The agents in New York were phenomenal. Eddie Pichata, Daryl Sobin. He was the senior agent. Eddie Pichata became the long-term case agent with whom we worked, and ultimately many of the indictments came out of New York. But Panama was also the silver bullet. Joe Evans and Lee Nash, those guys really helped us out to bring this case to a successful conclusion.
Unbelievable. And I want to just back up a second there and talk about the intel analyst and what their role is. You know, Javi and I, our intel analysts don't get the recognition that they deserve. I mean, quite honestly, if you can get a good analyst and a good agent that can get along, that's one of the best investigative teams you're ever going to find. They're almost like our unsung heroes, but the truth is they're the brains, and then the agents are more like the knuckle dragger brawn that goes out and actually does the activities. So I'm saying all that because I don't want to downplay the significance of what an intel analyst brings to the table. You outline it very well in the book, what her capabilities were, how she brought added value to everything. There was one part where, not to give away the book, but you failed to respond, and you fall on the sword and say that's one of the worst decisions I ever made. But you did it because you were involved in a family function, and our families suffer so much because, my priorities in my opinion should be God, family, and the job. But the truth is, in our line of work, it's the job, and then the job. Mm-hmm. And who suffers? Our families do. Mm-hmm. So, so just giving a shout out to the analysts out there. Thank you folks so much for what you do. We do have good investigators, but you bring so much added value and so much intelligence to what we do. You make a lot of sense out of the muddled things that you can put it all together for us. You can figure it out.
The only difference between an analyst and an agent is the agent carries a gun and, has arrest powers and kicks the doors and does everything. But the analyst puts the case together too. The analyst is just like an agent, and operations and investigations are intelligence driven. Yeah. So without that, and in this case, this analyst came to the table with a lot of experience. She had been working in Colombia while you guys were chasing Escobar. She was given accolades and awards for her work on the Cali cartel, which followed Medellin. She was very, very skilled and talented. And so, yeah, I hope I described her accurately in the book.
Oh, you did. I thought that's very admirable that you did, because they're, like I say, they're the unsung heroes. They don't get the recognition it's always the agents get the recognition, especially in DEA. And I've seen other federal agencies that treat their analysts like third-class citizens. I mean, to the point where I was embarrassed for them. Mm-hmm. But, we'll let that go because we're talking about your book here. There'll be another show sometime. So you've got Junior. He's here in the United States. With his child in the hospital in Houston, and you're getting all this recorded phone calls, but you have to corroborate those. You have to go out and find evidence that supports what they're talking about. How do you do that when you're talking about an international informant who is he Mexican by birth?
Yes.
And he's going to go back to Mexico. So how do you do that? I know you know how to do that. I'm leading up to tell our listeners how you do that.
Well, in this case, there were two different informants. One, it was the Colombian still in Mexico. I would say describe that control factor with a long leash, which means kind of like When you're fishing, you let out a lot of line. He had a lot of line, and he could swim wherever he wanted. In this case, Junior, because we did not want to risk losing him, we kept him on a very short leash. In fact, we put like a shock collar, figuratively speaking here, but we put him on the phone. We put him on the phone and made him, compromise himself. And so that he would know, if you decide to change your mind, you go back to Mexico, you've already compromised yourself with your associates. And if you do, betray us and our trust, you might end up, being called an informant anyway. Word might make its way down to Mexico. Now, is that the right thing to do? I don't know. It seemed to work. It put the fear of God in him. But that was at the very beginning. And shortly into his relationship with us, it was pretty clear that he wanted to turn the corner and, fix his karma. And he came fully on board to a point where he wanted to be referred to as 007.
I was wondering if you were going to mention that. Because he repeatedly uses it.
So not only do we have him on the phones, but we gave him a computer, and we said, you're going to be online with us, and you're going to be recording online we want every single communication, criminal, incriminating communication, to be recorded. Because we want to hold them accountable, and we're waiting for, someday putting some people in jail. And he broke it down. Not only did he cough up the number of kilos, but he identified everybody that he could identify fully, and begged us to stay away from a couple particular individuals while we could go after all the others. And he helped us identify networks operating domestically. That means the distributors, the transporters from the border up to New York and other cities, and then the transporters moving large scale quantities of cocaine in containers, maritime containers, out of Panama, the free trade zone, using front companies based in Panama. And we got it from soup to nuts, head to toe. We got it all. And we started targeting major members of the Sinaloa Federation. We opened it up not only to the Colombians and the Guatemalans as well, but multiple federated allies, to include the members of the Valencia organization, which we referred to as the Millennium Cartel. They are the father of what we have now today as the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, or CJNG. They are the world threat in as far as cartels in Mexico today.
Wow. What danger was he facing by cooperating with DEA?
Well, extreme. So we knew that at one point or another, we would have to send him back to Mexico, because he needed to get face to face with the guys we were looking to, right, to target and to indict. And once we were convinced that it was time, we sent him back. And we knew he was committed to the team. And, again, it was very, you got to swing the bat. You don't swing the bat, you don't get on base, or you don't hit a home run. And I think, we ended up hitting a home run with him.
Oh, big time. His child was the child released from the hospital and they went back to Mexico. Is that how that worked?
The child ended up passing while he was working with us in New York. And when he got the news, needless to say, it was heartbreaking. And for all of us, it was like a moment of pause where we had to stop DEA mindset and start thinking about family and And it was tough. It was difficult.
You actually showed compassion for an informant.
Yes. I mean, I'm sure anybody who had any, just a little compassion in their soul would have been crushed getting the news the way we got it, the way he got it. He was doing undercover stuff for us.
We're all fathers, mothers. We have children. And I kind of said that menacingly because I'm trying to be a tough guy, but that's what happens. People want to portray us as, well, they used to call us jackbooted thugs at one point. Us in ATF, I think it was. Like and I mean, over the past few years, it's amazing how law enforcement has been denigrated in their reputation and made out to be devils and the bad guy, worse than the criminals that are out there. And I think we're starting to see that come back around and see the accusers for what they were, that they were just trying to manipulate other people. But, and I wanted to point that out there because, yes, we took an oath to do a job and to protect our country, but we also have compassion when it's required. The informant needs time to go deal with his grief, to deal with his family. I can't imagine. Well, actually, I can't imagine losing a child because we've lost a son. But it's devastating. It's devastating. And the fact that he came back was, honestly, to me, was surprising reading that in the book. And sorry for giving that point away, but I think it's important to our discussion.
We told him, you've done a lot. Go back home, be with your family, and we'll pick this back up when we can. When it's right, when the timing's right. So we gave him that long leash, and we didn't have to worry about it. But his meeting in New York while he was there opened some significant doors for a collection of evidence. And that really was a significant trip that we took. And let me just say this. The story, like I said, and I repeat it, it's the human side. It is about the interrelationships between bad guy and bad guy, between the good guys and the bad guys, between the good guys and the good guys. And it's not, it's not a DEA fantasy story. It reveals some of the nasty, underbelly of what goes on in trying to do cases like this, where you're not only crossing, within an office from group to group, but you're crossing jurisdictions, cities and countries, and dealing with different people who all have egos, and they've got marching orders. And in this case, Miami had its marching orders, and they're Colombian. They became rather protective. And then, we got off the train kind of took its own fork. Yeah. And so that, it all had a good ending, but, it was the process that was kind of brutal at times. Nothing criminal, and there were no bad people. Just some mistakes that I think were made. Like you pointed out earlier, the whole goal is for an agent to be in control. And once the informant in this case feels like he or she can take control, then they're going to try to take the reins and run with it. And we know, better than anybody how smart the Colombians are. In fact, the Colombians many times will send informants into us to work with us just to find out what we're doing.
Yep. And if you're not a strong agent with experience on how to deal with informants, they will play you, and you end up divulging information that you should never divulge to an informant. The informant's supposed to tell you things, not you tell the informant things. And you know what? It's easy to sit back here and quarterback from my armchair here in the office, and it's easier said than done, I guess is the old saying that you say here, because some of the informants are that good.
Well, this guy he was very good. And, there are themes when I asked about describing the book, there are things that come to mind, descriptors, and, they include loyalty, betrayal, redemption. And the book is just filled with irony. You go, oh, how did that happen? So, I hope it did it justice.
Oh, believe me, you did. That's why we're talking about it here. So your meetings in the United States, you've got agents all over the United States that can cover those, and they've got task forces. And like in New York, they've got the New York Police Department and the New York State Police involved with their task force. And you got multiple cars out there, multiple people doing surveillance, some in cars, some in planes, some on foot. But now you're going to Panama and you're going to Colombia and Mexico and other countries. How in the world do you surveil those?
Good counterparts. Panama. Joe Evans was in charge of the Panama office. Joe.
Very well.
And Lee Nash, you know him, certainly. Mm-hmm. And Lee Nash, Panama has got to be one of the busiest foreign offices that we have, because everybody's going there. All the crooks like to move their money, launder their money. Colombians feel safe meeting there, conspiring to move, tonnage into our country via Mexico. And so Panama was where a lot of activity was based. Specifically, front companies that were used to mix legitimate merchandise together with several tons of cocaine. And they would go into crates, and those crates would go on board maritime ships, and those maritime ships would sail out of Panama's free trade zone on its way to Mexico's ports. And in this story, the primary port that was used, there were two. One was Port of Progreso, and which was down the southern portion of Mexico. And the other port was on the Pacific side, Manzanillo. And that's where, the palms were already, greased, and people were paid off, and the cocaine would just move right through without an inspection, get warehoused, and then further transported to other, in this case, in our case, Mexico City and Monterrey. Those were two big centers for staging large amounts of cocaine that were either resold to mid-level traffickers, moved to Europe, or moved up to the United States. And one of the things that we learned in this case was that there are multiple players involved, and I mean many. One load of 5 tons, 3 tons, 10 tons, 20 tons could be owned by 4 or 5 different investors. Some investors in Mexico, like the Güeros, were able to have an entire shipment of 12 to 20 tons there on their own, shipped into the country. That's a lot of capital and a lot of credit with Colombian sources. But there's just no one size fits all. Dependent upon the cartel and dependent upon the moment and the relationships, they could combine, various investors could combine loads, multi-thousand kilo loads, and then split it up once it got to Mexico. We learned a lot in this case, and we tried to spell a lot of that out. A broker's function, the dangers of being a broker. We try to spell all that out in the book.
Now, I learned a lot of things from the book because I wasn't totally familiar with the purpose of Panama, about how they would reship, they would repackage it to conceal it in cargo containers that are coming up on ships. Also, the responsibilities along each step of the way, whether it's somebody that's controlling the transporters, the warehouses where it's being stored, the people who are going to repackage it, the percentage, or how they would actually steal from each other. I think there's one with was it the cocaine and the olive oil? was damaged. Who's responsible when the cocaine gets to the final destination for the damaged cocaine? How do they deal with the loss? What's expected from the Colombians? What's expected from the main kingpins in Mexico when a load is seized or part of the damage? Going into the face-to-face meetings that these guys have to go to explain the loss, and then the responsibility. I mean, it just, that's the thing I like about this book. It takes you from A to Z through the entire process. Very educational. You know, I would have liked to have known that back then, but I'm not sure it would have helped with any of the cases I was doing. But you're talking about the significance of Panama. Where did Pablo and his cohorts go when they had to flee Colombia? To Panama. So it's always been that safe haven, especially back when Noriega was in play, because, you know, he was playing everybody against the middle. He was taking money from everybody, which is why he eventually got arrested and, you know, extradited to the United States. Was Mexican extradition type thing. But it's Panama, you know. But it was also very interesting to read about how Joe and his agents down there had that relationship with the Panamanians, because they sound as professional as anybody I've ever heard of around the world.
They were good, and I not only attribute that to the Panamanian police and their capabilities. They've got some corruption down there as well, but I attribute that to Joe Evans's leadership and his ability to work with counterparts. Like I said, I learned a lot from him, and that is really where he really shined. I mean, he was a tremendous agent when he was in Miami as well, a wiretapping agent, but he was able to cultivate friendships. He was able to change the law in Panama to develop their first lawful wiretapping platform. And he was busy down there. And Lee Nash was one of his, top agents. And Lee Nash was assigned to us, our case. And, and we were grateful for that.
That was surprising too. And I read that part where you guys made a phone call and Joe said, or maybe your agents were in Panama, and he said, well, listen, I'm over at the Physicalia's office. We're changing the laws. I mean, here's this, ugly American down there in Panama working with their prosecutors and their attorneys that's going to change the laws within Panama. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that was Joe. Joe, when he came to run things for DEA in Mexico as their regional director, he did the same thing. But the difference is that Joe knew those were two different environments. And when he went to Mexico, he was well aware that we had to play poker with the odds stacked against us. He was aware that we had to work within a corrupt system, and that meant working with the upper echelon corrupt leaders to get done what we could do. And we got a lot done during his time there in Mexico.
And just on a little side note here, to talk about how these friendships within the law enforcement community continue throughout your life. Javier and I were several years ago, I think it was before COVID, we're in England, we're in London to do our little Escobar show. And I just happened to call Joe because he was working for, I think it was HSBC back then. And where we were staying was on the Thames River. And, London's huge. That's a massive city. The traffic is just horrible. And I called Joe and I said, where are you? What you doing? And I said, we're in town for a couple of days. And he's like, listen, man, you and Javier have got to come and see me tonight. Let's go ahead and have a drink. And I said, well, Joe, I don't know where you are. And he told me where he was. And I said, well, here's where we are. And he said, look out your window across the river. And I did. He said, you see that big tower that says HSBC? I'm sitting in that tower. And our hotel, he said, your hotel actually has a ferry boat that will take you across the river for free and come and pick you up. And so Javier and I jumped on the ferry and went over and met Joe that evening for a few hours with some of the people that work for him. And Joe is not a bashful person. He's former United States Marine. He will always speak his mind. And if it hurts your feelings, you'll get over it. And the way he talked to these guys, because they were very prim and proper British men, in the banking industry. And he's one of us that's just sitting there, and the the cuss words are flying, and he's telling them what they're going to do and what they're not going to do. And the boy can drink more beer than anybody I think I've ever met in my life.
Oh my God. All right. I'll talk a little bit about Joe from my experience. All right. Since we're on the subject. Yeah. Yes. I'm sure he shortened my life for a few years from the booze. Okay. That and the Costa Ricans, you know how it is. Cops, they don't trust you unless you're, right, hanging out and doing the thing, doing the drinking a little bit or a lot of bit. Here's a funny story with Joe. And I'm sure when you were there, he was calling his British colleagues dude.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody's a dude. Everybody's male, a dude. Female. It could be a little kid. You're a dude.
So, okay, let me tell you the story about dude in Costa Rica. My partner and Joe was a member, part of the group that went out to seek out and approve GLQs, government living quarters. And it was not just for DEA, but it was for the State Department family as well. So Joe at the time was a tobacco chewer. He always had some snuff in his mouth and a cup. So here we are in a house, walking around this beautiful home that we're considering, as a potential GLQ for the United States government, and the owner's there. And Joe didn't have the cup. He didn't have the cup in his hand. So there he comes up to, I think it's a planter or whatever. He spits and there's this guy giving him the Costa Rica. What the hell did you just do?
Was that the owner?
No apologies. I think so. It was either the owner or the realtor. I don't remember, but it was somebody who was like, he didn't care, But I'll tell you what, man. He was a man who, could walk the walk, talk it and walk it. He was just fun to work with and has always been one of my favorite partners on the job.
He is. And boy, he doesn't need much sleep at all. He is wired 24/7.
My 8:30 for him was 5:30. Yeah. He'd be in the office at 5:30. He'd want to go to lunch at 10:30, 11 o'clock. So I had to readjust.
Yeah. Yeah. A legend. He is a legend.
Yeah.
So, in Mexico, how were you able to corroborate a lot of the phone calls that are being made and the meetings he's going to? I know there's one where you talk about, I think he called on, was it Christmas or New Year's Eve? And one of the other guys wanted to go to Vegas, and, you're trying to give your crew time off, but that's where it comes really interfering with your family, because you've got to cover things like that.
We had to cover meetings in Vegas because he was last minute, and this guy Junior was very quick-witted, sharp on his feet, and within a short period of time started to behave like an actual undercover agent. If he wasn't a crook, we probably would have wanted to give him a job with DEA. But he was very quick on his feet, and his partner, criminal associate, wanted to go to Vegas, and he thought it would be a good opportunity to go tell us about it and continue the recording, because he and his partner were putting together various ventures. Not only were they talking about past trafficking ventures and debts associated with those trafficking deals, but new things. Not only smuggling multi-ton quantities of coke out of Panama, but bringing money from the U.S. back to Mexico. So how did we record him? We followed him whenever we could. We knew that he was that he was recording the conversations, so we would put surveillance notes together with the recordings, and all that would be corroboration in a courtroom. It wasn't easy because a lot of this stuff was done, in kind of an environment, a difficult environment, but we did the best we could. But he, one thing about an informant is unlike our DEA guys, we have a team in the next room ready to kick the door down.
Right.
And a lot of times these informants of ours are all on their own. There's no cavalry waiting. So it's up to their, wits and balls to get themselves in and out. So
without giving up too much about the book, because we want people to get the book and read it, were there times when you thought his cover was blown, when maybe it was a close call that he would be discovered, or was he high enough in the organization that the other traffickers respected him and would never consider him to be a snitch?
Both those things. He had enough credit. 47 tons. The man had enough credit between Colombia and Mexico, where he could have gotten out of his share, and he did, of issues that propped up, to include losses of coke, debts. He just would, borrow from Peter to pay Paul. He was constantly very slick, and he's very confident in his business. But the stuff that we were worried about was during surveillances where our agents were around covering him. He would give us like winks of the eye, or smile when he thought the bad guys weren't looking, because he knew that the agents that were covering him. And so he was just a crack up. And of course, it went to the whole 007 thing. He was digging on it. And, in fact, he was coming up with ideas that we hadn't thought of, that we thought, hey, yeah, that'll work.
Wow.
And so, we liked working with him.
In your entire career, 31 years with DEA, and then your NCIS career as well, a couple of years, did you ever deal with another informant that you would consider to be an equal to Junior?
No, this was a career event for me, a career encounter. It really did. It affected me personally. Professionally, I learned a lot. It affected me personally. Developing that kind of a relationship with an informant was unusual. It went against the grain, but I'm unapologetic. We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't step over the line. But like you said, compassion. And you learn that with age if you're open for it. And to flip people, to get them to cooperate, I've realized, sometimes you need to eat a little humble pie and not play that tough guy role, because it doesn't work most of the time.
Yeah. It does. You do have to develop a certain relationship with the informants, because there's got to be a mutual trust. You have to determine what that motivation is for them at the beginning to snitch on their friends, sometimes family, and what's in it for them in the end. There was Kevin Stevens was my partner in Miami for a while, and we recruited this guy who was a Colombian attorney and was living in South Florida, living down in Kendall in Miami. And this guy, we could trust him about as far as we could throw him, and he probably weighed about 280. Big boy. But you know what? The times when we would go out and surveil him, when he didn't know that we were anywhere around, we never caught the guy in anything that he wasn't supposed to be involved with. And we would tell certain things, and we would surveil him unbeknownst to him, and he would call in and report. So it kind of developed a trust in each other, but it's still, I've never been in that position that you were, where I've had an informant that we developed that type of close relationship. The first informant I dealt with, and Kenny Peterson was a senior agent, I'm the new guy, but this was back before cell phones, and we had pagers, and, this guy was a pilot. He was a gringo pilot that had been arrested smuggling drugs across the border from Mexico years and years ago. Had done his prison time, was off federal probation, and was, Kenny recruited him as a informant for us. And he lived in another state. And so he would call me, Kenny would have him call me because I'm the new guy if it was nighttime. It's because we did, you don't want to record from your home phone. You don't want them to have your home phone number. I would have to go, he'd page me, and I'd have to go out to a pay phone that, in the middle of the night with one of the handheld recorders and the suction cups that you used to attach to the receiver, and put your money in and pay for the phone call and all that. And so, we worked this guy. He brought massive loads of cocaine out of Colombia. He had his own plane that he was flying in. He actually got kidnapped in Colombia and was held captive for a couple of months before we were able to get him out. But eventually he didn't think that we'd paid him enough money. And we'd covered all his expenses. We paid him for every load. We paid him for the danger he was taking, but he thought he deserved more. So he goes to a major newspaper in the Midwest, and we were front page for 5 days in a row because as I was recording him, he was recording me. And thank God I hadn't said anything
my God,
out of the way. But that's the kind of things that you can go up against with these informants because they're trying to play you just like you're trying to play them.
I had a female source doing the same thing, recording me in Bolivia, and she was going over to Chile to interact, and she was suggesting that she bring back a sample kilo of cocaine. Thank God we said no. Yes. Don't do that. And she thought it was a great idea, and we were recording her as well because she was kind of one of those. I'm not sure we trust her. She went out there and guess what? She come back at the border and she got popped, did some time in Chile, got out of jail, and then sued the government. Of course, she lost, but she sued me, named me in the lawsuit. And thank God I had a witness as well. Don't meet alone with female sources.
Or any source.
It looks good in the movies, but
yeah. Which just because it's on TV doesn't make it true, does it? Narcos?
No, it doesn't.
Narco series?
I've heard of that. I've heard of that show.
Well, I don't want to give us the end of the book and it is a surprise ending. I was just telling Mike about it before we started recording. Is there anything else you want to cover in the book before we kind of start winding this down a little bit?
No, I think we've covered it pretty well. I'd like to think that people will understand the complexities in what we do, and it really is exposes a lot of things. It gives an under the hood look at how we conduct business, domestically, foreign, how we interact with one another, how we interact with informants, stuff like that. I think is good, but I would just like to say. The lesson to be learned in not only with this story, but in my career and your career, I'm sure, is do the right thing for the right reason. Yes. And guess what? It'll always work out.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're pointing it out. And ladies and gentlemen, you really do get a peek behind the curtain at the internal operations of DEA domestically, internationally in this book. It's not all holding hands and singing songs between each other because there was some there's a little rift between certain offices within DEA and personalities come into play, but that's the truth of the situation. And then this is certainly not an isolated incident. The problem is, and this happens all over. Law enforcement tends to be very hold your cards close to the chest because it's my case and I'm not telling you. You can tell me about your case, but I'm not telling you about mine. It's not just internally, it's between other agencies. There are certain agencies that will almost there was a case in the U.S. where we wanted to pay another agency's informant a significant amount of money, and you've got to have witnesses, and there's forms that have to be signed. And this agency wanted us to give them the money because they didn't want to divulge their informant to us. They were that protective. And guess what? The informant didn't get paid by us. Because I'm accountable for that money. If I sign for it, I've got to show where it went. I don't want to be accused of stealing the money, right? But so that's how silly it gets. But the sad part is when those type situations happen, who wins? It's not you, the people that we're sworn to protect. It's the bad guys. They win in those type of situations. So it's hopefully the agents that were somewhat confrontational and didn't want to play ball with everybody else, hopefully they learned from the investigation and that their careers straightened out after that. I love the fact that your special agent in charge of the Houston division, who is a legend with DEA himself, Jimmy Craig, told you guys, do what's best for the case. Don't worry about this petty infighting. And that's a true leader, because we as the worker bees hate that decision. You want him to go there. You want some type of retaliation. But again, he was smart enough to know, but from his experience and expertise, he knew how to move this global investigation forward by simply saying, suck it up, get your personal feelings out of the way, and do what's right for the case. So, Jimmy, shout out to you, brother, for a job well done there. And that's just one, because you are a legend. Before we finish up here, Mike, I asked you about, I couldn't find any awards that you'd gotten throughout your case, but you did mention to me that you'd gotten a couple of administrators awards, and within DEA at that time, that was the highest award we could get within our own agency. You actually got two of them. One was a group award and one was an individual administrators awards. But neither one of them had anything to do with this case, did they?
No.
And no. This is one of the biggest cases that, at that time that DEA had ever worked. But then you did get a recognition from another agency, which you were really, really proud of. Tell us about that.
Well, the state of Texas honors various law enforcement officials for heroic and investigative accomplishment successes. In this case, it was an investigative accomplishment that my name was submitted in the hat, and I was given the award titled Super Cop.
Cool.
And it was specifically, in recognition for the work done on this case.
Excellent. That was, not to tell my story, but we were awarded the first Distinguished Service Cross from the Colombian National Police for the Escobar investigation. And I think that meant more to Javier and I than anything else we could have gotten, because we didn't get a whole lot of other things. But before I let you go, brother, is there any words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to leave with our listeners? Maybe I know we have a large following of young people that might be considering a career in law enforcement, or just words of wisdom in general, based on all your experiences.
Absolutely. Thank you. I would say there's nothing like being a law enforcement officer, whether you're a municipal policeman. My brother was a local cop in an incorporated city in San Diego called National City. It's fun. Whatever level of police work you do, whether it's local, state, or federal, I encourage you to take on that career. It's very rewarding, but also look at it as a marathon, not as a sprint. Pace yourself. Make sure you dedicate some time with your family. And it's all about, and I learned this from my wife, a very valuable lesson: balance. I didn't have that as a young guy coming into this business, because it was all DEA, all good guys, all black and white. No, there's a lot of gray, and your family is always going to be there with you. When you hang up the badge, your family is going to be there. Narcotics business, it's a high divorce rate. Just keep perspective.
True words of wisdom there. You folks couldn't see me as he was talking, but I'm sitting here shaking my head at everything he's saying. I know I probably look like an idiot here. Mike's smiling at me now. But it is. And our families are our unsung heroes. And I like to give them a shout out, because they allow us the opportunity to go do what we think is important. Quite honestly, we do it because we think it's exciting, and it's a real adrenaline rush for most of this stuff. Mike has done things that I won't tell you about, that when I heard about him, the things he did in Mexico, I just looked at him like, you got two heads. And that might be a third episode we talk about somewhere down the road. But it's the heroic things that our people do. And then our families are still standing behind us all these years later. We all marry up. There's no reason that my wife, Connie, should still be with me after 41 years. Because when Javier and I moved to Medellin to live with the Colombian National Police for 18 months, I left her in Bogota, and she's doing her thing and just got bigger stones than I ever dreamt of having. That's one thing I like about her. She's not scared. She's an independent lady. But same to your family and your children. I thought I did a really good job later in life attending some of their activities, but after I retired, they told me about all the things that I missed. And you realize that, I've been so self-centered, putting myself and my job in front of the family for all these years. And sadly, I probably still do. I'm a really slow learner, but that's what makes, that's why I make a point of talking about our unsung heroes, our families. God bless you all. We couldn't do it without you. So, Mike, I was looking up trying to find things about you. I found you on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Mike Chavarria. And on Instagram, it's Mike Chava, Chava 1026. I'm going to guess that's your birthday. Is that right?
Oh, my anniversary.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. And I looked up too while you were talking here where we could find your book, Junior, a Son of the Gulf Cartel, and it shows Walmart. And I found it at thriftbooks.com, of course, Amazon, Google Books. I'm going to guess that's a audio version. So, I mean, the book's out there, but ladies and gentlemen, check this out. And I'm sorry, before we go, are there other social media sites where people can find you? Do you have a website yet?
I'm in the process of creating a website that's probably going to be released this week. There are some video trailers for the story that are also going to be part of that website and maybe perhaps on the social media. But I would say to the audience, if you've come on, for example, you get on Amazon, don't be surprised if there's a little bit of delay where it says out of stock. It's just a temporary thing. They will have both hardbook, paperback, and the Kindle version of the story all available. So those will all be on the website as well. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you, talk about the story. I think there are a lot of interesting lessons to be learned from it all. And it's always a pleasure being with you. You're one of DEA superstars.
Well, thank you for saying that. I don't agree with that, but I do appreciate you saying that. What will be the name of your website?
I believe right now we're still finalizing it, but I believe it's going to be authormikechavarria.com. authormikechavarria.com. Yeah.
Okay.
And, I hope those of you who are interested in reading it, I hope you enjoy it and feel as moved reading it as I did writing it.
Well, and we left you hanging there because I didn't tell you the ending is a surprise, and we're not going to tell you about it because we want you to go read the book. But check out Mike's website. By the time this comes out, which is tentatively scheduled for December 22nd, just before Christmas. Hopefully his website will be up and running by then. I'll put some posts on YouTube, on Instagram, and on TikTok about this also. So come on over and support the guy. It really is a behind the curtain look at DEA, how they do things that lead to these phenomenal investigations, operations worldwide, arrests, the seizures of massive assets and massive loads of cocaine. And it's a great description of the dedication that the men and women of DEA and other agencies as well show in order to try to protect you and me, because I'm a has-been. So it's been a hoot, Mike, having you on here, catching up with you. I know I'm kind of stumbling over my words because I hate to let you go. We've exchanged tons of emails over this and phone calls to get to this interview. And it's every time we do, it's like old home week. It's just two old friends catching up. I know we act silly sometimes, and that's just what you do. I don't know if that's old age or maybe it's just the law enforcement culture. I think it's both. But an honor to have you on here. You are a true American patriot and a hero. You've served your country admirably. For 30? How many years were you in the Navy?
It was a short period of time, 2 years on active duty, and then I was a reserve for 4 years. And so a total of 6 years, and I had to resign. I voluntarily resigned my commission to be a full-time DEA agent. There was no way I was able to do both.
Yeah. So we're looking at 35 to 40 years service to your country?
Yeah.
How can you not say that's a hero? I mean, there's no greater calling that you're willing to sacrifice yourself for your fellow man. So truly an honor, bro.
Let me just say this to so that we can make it clear. This book is not the Mike Chavarria show. This book encompassed an entire team, not only within Houston, but all these other cities and locations. It was a team accomplishment. So I want to make that a point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you really did in your description of everything we talked about in the book. So, okay. So ladies and gentlemen, can't thank you enough for coming back every week. We're going to continue to roll this show as long as I can. There's some new things maybe coming out next year in 2026. Stick around. We'll see where that goes. You get promised a lot of things in these positions, and sometimes they happen, but most times they don't. But you never know when one will happen. So I say this every week. I don't understand why you come back, but reality is we do. We understand because you love playing the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all. And as you heard today, the game of crimes. God bless you all. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next week.